Welcome to English with Mr. Harding. Thank you so much for joining us today's session. If you've been with us before, you'll know that I'm in a series talking about I'd like to get better at. And the whole concept behind this series is looking at those concepts, those ideas that perhaps you come into contact with in a lesson, and maybe you spend an entire week on it, but you feel like because the concept's quite difficult and complicated, actually you'd like a bit more time on it. To put it in the phrase that I have been for this series, you would say to yourselves, I'd like to get better at. And that's what this whole series of lessons is designed to do. We're focusing at this particular point in time on the skill of reading. So we've been looking at lots of different I'd like to get better at. And we've been looking at I'd like to get better at summarizing. I'd like to get better at inferring, and I'd like to get better at structure. You can look at all of those previous episodes if you'd like to. Check them out. There's resources at the end of them which will really help you to unpack and to really embed this learning so that you can get a strong and a confident grasp on that particular skill or concept. Today's session has actually been something that someone has requested. So thank you so much for requesting this session. As I have said to you before, I will tackle anything, any questions that people have when it comes to English. So please do remember to like, to comment, to share, to subscribe. And in the comments, you can just tell me any particular skill in English that you are struggling with, and we will cover those. So today, this whole session is going to be focused around I'd like to get better at evaluation. So as we do every single time in English with Mr. Harding, we're going to do this in 3 different ways. I'm going to teach the concept just over 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm going to take you through a worked example where we get the opportunity to explain, to examine, and to unpack how you would actually apply that particular concept in a real example. And then the final step, at the end of every single session, I always attach some resources. And this is an opportunity for you to independently apply this concept and to practice it on your own time. So let's begin right now. Let's begin at looking at this concept of evaluation. So maybe you've heard about this concept of evaluation. I'm thinking the person who asked this question, it's most likely that you're in year 10 or 11. The concept of evaluation turns up in a particular question, English language, paper 1, question 4. And it requires this skill of evaluation. So what is evaluation? Evaluation is this. Evaluation is your ability to defend a point of view or judgment that you have made. You may have heard about evaluation before, but when it comes to this particular part of the paper and when it comes to English, this is what we mean by it. We mean very specifically your ability to form an opinion and your ability to defend your opinion. A practical example of where you may have come across this before in your own personal life, just to give you an idea of what we're really talking about here. How many of you have ever tried to persuade your parents to give you something maybe ahead of time? Maybe it was your birthday in a month and you wanted to try and persuade your mum or your dad to actually give you that present early. Now, if you're smart about it, you're not just going to turn up and just sort of say, Mum, Dad, I really, really want my bike early. In that particular instance, the chances are you're going to get shut down. Your parents are going to go, it's not your birthday yet, you need to learn to wait. However, if you're a smart person, here's what you do. You go to Mum and Dad with the same request that you'd like to have your bike earlier than your actual birthday, but what you then do is you've then prepared a list of reasons why your parents should give you your bike early. This means that you've thought about what could be some of the counter arguments that your parents could come up with to actually say, well, here's the reasons why. And in defending your point of view, you're going to unpack reasons why actually your point of view is the correct one. Now, perhaps you've never heard it in these terms before, but from an English point of view, what you are doing there is you are applying the skill of evaluation. In other words, you're taking a point of view and you're giving reasons why that point of view is really powerful or should be something that in this case your parents should get on board with. And that's the skill that you need to apply when it comes to evaluation. Now let's look at a particular example right now, because this will help you really understand this concept and understand how to apply it, because it is one of the most complex concepts that you will come up against in GCSE. It was originally actually pulled down from the A-level syllabus. So in other words, people who were 16, 17, 18 were studying this concept, but they decided to bring it into the new GCSE. So let's look at an example. Let's look at a question where evaluation is the key skill that's required. Focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source, from line 21 to the end. A reader said, so right now you're about to hear the opinion that you have to decide whether you agree with it or whether you disagree with it. A reader said, this part of the story where Alice decides to continue digging for the object is very mysterious and suggests her discovery may be life-changing. To what extent do you agree? Now, when it comes to evaluation, the most important part of that question are the final 6 words. To what extent do you agree? Now, evaluation requires you to think about what you think. And I think one of the reasons why this is quite hard for some students is because oftentimes when we're in lessons, you may have found yourself that your teacher may already have provided the idea for you. So in other words, actually, from your point of view, often in an English lesson, you may not necessarily be required to actually think deeply about why you think what you do. But here, that's what this question requires you to do. It requires you not only to be able to say what your point of view, but to be able to explain why you think that. And that's why it's hard. It's not difficult often for us to come up with reasons and ideas why people should agree with us. What's more difficult is for us to then think critically about, well, how did we reach that conclusion? What are the reasons behind our ideas? And that's why this is difficult. And so it says, to what extent do you agree? Now, the important thing to unpack here when we're trying to answer this question, and the thing I think is important for every single student to do, is to recognize that this question is not about just yes or no. This question is about something we call an opinion line. Now, the best way to show you this is if I draw it for you. So I'm just drawing it here. Now here on this opinion line, you should be able to see that it has on one side disagree and has on the other side agree. Now when it asks the question, to what extent do you agree? What it's asking you is this: do you fully agree? Perhaps on this side. Do you mostly agree? Do you partially agree? Do you mostly disagree? And do you completely disagree? In other words, it's a gradient. It's asking you to think about, well, do you completely agree with what that person said? That student who read this extract. What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? Now, there's been a lot of confusion about this question, and I think one of the helpful things to point out, and just in case you don't know, I do mark the exam board as well. And one of the things I think often helps students is this: when you read that statement, largely, you are going to be encouraged to agree with it. In other words, it's probably best if you already decide, well, I agree with that statement. And then that is your first step. So you've decided, I agree with what this person is saying. Now, if you completely agree, all you're then going to do is you're then going to look for the list of reasons that actually back up that statement, whatever statement you have been given. In this case, the statement is this. This part of the story where Alice decides to continue digging for the object is very mysterious and suggests her discovery may be life-changing. When you say you're agreeing with that, you're saying, and here are my reasons why I believe what the reader believes. So in this particular question, actually, they've helpfully given us some bullet points. And these bullet points are there to try and almost create the train tracks to allow you to formulate a good answer. So let's look at them. In your response, you could consider the reasons why Alice decides to continue digging. Evaluate, there's that key word, how the writer creates a sense of mystery. Support your response with references to the text. So let's just pack those 3 bullet points really simply. Number 1, consider the reasons. In other words, this person has made a particular statement. If we've decided we're going to agree with it, you need to come up with 4 or 5 different reasons why you actually agree with what that person said. Number 2, evaluate how the writer creates a sense of mystery. So in this particular case, here's what they're telling you. The part of the statement that you need to agree with is this, that actually this particular part of the extract creates a sense of mystery. This is really helpful. Maybe you've heard about your teachers talk about the effect on the reader. Actually, really helpfully in this question, it already tells you the main effect you are looking for. In this case, the main effect that you're looking for is a sense of mystery. So when you go looking for the reasons, which was bullet point number 1, you only need to count those reasons, those devices that the writer uses that all help to create a sense of mystery. If it creates any other effect, it's not a relevant point. In other words, it helps you to narrow which particular quotations you need to choose from. You only need to choose the quotations that actually create a sense of mystery. If they created a sense of fear, don't consider them. If they created a sense of relaxation, don't consider them, because it's this sense of mystery that you've been asked to focus on. The final one is this. It says, support your response with references to the text. What does that mean? That means you need to use lots and lots of quotation. Now, the best way to do this is embedded quotation. This is where, as part of your sentence, you actually weave your quotation into the ideas and the thoughts that you have. Now, we've read the question, but I think it's probably a good idea for us now to actually read the text that this question relates to. And so that's what we're going to do next. So as we read it together, I want you really to be thinking through what are the pieces here that actually create a sense of mystery. And just to really help you, I'm going to start slightly earlier than line 21, just so you can get yourself into what's happening here. Now, we're also told a little bit of information about this extract, and I'm going to read that to you to begin with. Alice, so that's the character, a university student, has volunteered to help on an archaeological dig, looking for any evidence of the past. She is in the Pyrenees Mountains in France during her summer holidays. And here's how it begins. It's painstaking and monotonous work for the most part, the digging and scraping, the cataloguing and recording, and so far they've turned up little of significance to justify their efforts. They've come across a few fragments of medieval pots and bowls and a couple of late 12th or early 13th century arrowheads. But certainly no evidence of the Stone Age village, which is the focus of the excavation. And then here's where line 21 begins, which is our focus. Alice is tempted to go down and join her friends and colleagues. Her calves are already aching from squatting. The muscles in her shoulders are tense, but she knows that if she stops now, she'll lose her momentum. Hopefully, her luck's about to change. Earlier, she'd noticed something glinting beneath a large boulder, propped against the side of the mountain, neat and tidy, almost as if it had been placed there by a giant hand. Although she can't make out what the object is, even how big it is, she's been digging all morning and she doesn't think it will be much longer before she can reach it. She knows she should fetch someone, or at least tell Sheila, her best friend, who is the deputy on the dig. Alice is not a trained archaeologist, just a volunteer spending some of her summer holiday doing something worthwhile. But it's her last full day on site and she wants to prove herself. If she goes back down to the main camp now and admits she's onto something, everybody will want to be involved, and it will no longer be her discovery. In the days and weeks to come, Alice will look back to this moment. She will remember the quality of the light, the dust in her mouth, and wonder at how different things might have been had she made the choice to go and not stay, if she had played by the rules. She drains the last drop of water from the bottle and tosses it into her rucksack. For the next hour or so, as the sun climbs higher in the sky and the temperature rises, Alice carries on working. The only sounds are the scrape of metal on rock, the whine of insects, and the occasional buzz of a light aircraft in the distance. And that's where the extract ends. And then, as I've already read, a reader said this part of the story where Alice decides to continue digging for the object is very mysterious and suggests her discovery may be life-changing. To what extent do you agree? Okay, I'm now going to teach you two possible ways in which you can answer this question. And this is what also makes this question quite hard to answer, because the truth is that there's not one way of answering this question. There are a couple of ways of answering this question, and it all depends on how you think and how you're wired. So I'm going to teach those two different ways, and hopefully one of those ways will really resonate with you. And one of those ways you'll be like, yep, that's the way I think, that's the best way for me to do it. The first way, and this is a slightly more complicated way, but it will yield better marks, is what we call following a line of argument. Now, in this particular response, here's what you need to do. You need to, in your first couple of sentences, write what we call an overview statement. This is where you summarize your point of view in a response to the statement that was given. And then what you're then going to do is you're then going to unpack 3 or 4 different reasons in detail that back up your initial statement or point of view. So, just to remind us of what the statement said, it said this part of the story where Alice decides to continue digging for the object is very mysterious and suggests her discovery may be life-changing. So, do we agree? Now, as I've said before, the way this question is actually set up, it is set up to encourage you to completely agree with the statement. And therefore, that's probably the best way to go here. We probably want to say, well, we agree. We agree it is mysterious. And we agree that there are hints, subtle though they may be, that actually this discovery of Alice is going to be life-changing. The great thing is as well that the bullet points actually give us some direction. So yes, we need to look for things that are mysterious, but we also need to try and look at the reasons why Alice decides to continue to dig. So our overview, which is what we believe, so we either agree or we disagree or we fully agree, and in this case, I would suggest that we fully agree. We're then now going to try and find examples that actually back that up. So my overview would be, having read through this story, I fully agree with the idea that the student presents, which is that the finding of this object is mysterious and that the discovery may be life-changing. There are a number of very good reasons for this. And you notice how in those couple of sentences, all I've done is I've just summarized the main statement at the beginning. And then I'm making it clear when I'm answering this question that I'm going to approach it really logically and methodically. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say, well, okay, here's my first reason, here's my second reason, and here's my third reason. One of the things that's going to help us to do this, and this is why it's really helpful to do this overview and then reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. It's really helpful if you choose the first reason from early on in the extract, then your second reason from later on, and then your final reason, or if you've got 4 reasons, you choose them towards the end of the extract. We call this tracking through the extract. So let's work this through really, really practically. I'm going to pick up on a few quotations that you could use and explain how you could actually use them to support this idea that this part of the extract is mysterious, and it suggests that actually this find is going to be life-changing. When you read through the source, the first thing that I notice when I read it through is that we're told by the writer that her calves are aching from squatting and her muscles in her shoulders are tense. In other words, right at the very, very beginning, it's quite clear that this situation is really, really uncomfortable. In actual fact, as well, if you remember, we were also told that she was simply there as a volunteer. So although she's there as a volunteer, although she's clearly in quite a lot of physical pain from maybe the heat and everything, she decides, rather than going down the hill like her colleagues and friends are doing, she decides to stay up on the hill instead. Now, I pick this up because to me, I think that's kind of quite significant. Because bullet point 1 in the question actually said, consider reasons why Alice decides to continue digging. So what I'm picking up on here is the fact that Alice decides to keep digging. She can, even though the conditions actually would encourage her to give up at this point. And even her status within the group would encourage her to give up at this point. Like I say, she's not paid to be there, she's volunteering. It would be quite easy just to decide, you know what, I'm just going to go down with everyone else. But interestingly enough, she doesn't decide to do that. In actual fact, here's how the writer phrases, hopefully her luck's about to change. Earlier, she'd noticed something glinting beneath a large boulder. So at this point, I think the mystery here is this. The mystery is, why does Alice not go down when other people who are actually employed to do this do? This creates a sense in which whatever it is that Alice is about to find, it's really significant and important to her story. You have to remember that when writers are writing, one of the things that we assume in English is that when a writer does something, they do something deliberately. Now, you may have your own thoughts and opinions about that, but actually it's really, really not useful for you to try and think, well, I don't think the writer did that deliberately. It's actually better for you to assume writers have done things deliberately and then try and explain why. Now, the second bullet point gave us a really good hint. It talked about creating a sense of mystery. And I think that's exactly what this particular part of the text does. It creates this sense of mystery of why Alice is so determined to stay there rather than go down with the rest of her friends. Now, interesting enough, we are given a hint to why that could be later on, because it even says this, Alice is not a trained archaeologist, just a volunteer spending some of the summer holiday doing something worthwhile. But it's her last full day on site and she wants to prove herself. Now, this is on line 31 and 32. I personally believe that this is one of the most important quotes in the actual whole extract that we're given, because it actually does both the things that we've been talking about. It creates a sense of mystery. Why is it? And explains slightly why it is that she has continued digging. She's continued digging because she wants to prove herself. But even the phrase that the writer uses, it's her last full day on site, those particular words actually create the impression that whatever's about to happen is going to be very significant. And another way of saying significant is life-changing. Why would the writer tell us it's her last day? In other words, it's one of those things, maybe it's fate, that it's her last day and it's on her last day that she finds something that actually changes her life. So this quotation, as I say, does two things. In number one, it explains why she's not willing to come down like her other colleagues, which is really important when we link it to the other quotation. But it also creates this expectation that actually what's about to happen is going to change Alice's life. the technique and the method for this is foreshadowing. Another way that you could put this is you could use the word foregrounding. To foreground means to prepare the ground for the reader so that we are not surprised when the life-changing event happens. So you could say it like this. You could say, the writer's reference to the fact that it's her last full day foregrounds the fact that something life-changing is about to take place in Alice's life. That's the way to talk about this. You need to reference the method, you need to use a quotation, and then you need to link it back to the statement that you were given. And the statement focuses around the idea of mystery and life change. So whenever you talk about a question, whenever you are talking about a quotation, it must in some way link back to the idea of mystery or the idea of life change. And the skill of evaluation is for you then to talk about how successful you think that is, or how effective. So you'll notice that what I've done there is I've just prepared the groundwork. I've talked about the fact that this particular part, this phrase from the sentence, it foregrounds the fact that something life-changing is going to happen to Alice. But if you only did that, you're only doing as much as question 2 asks you to. So you found a relevant quotation, you found the relevant method that the writers used, and you've also been able to explain the effect. But an evaluation is the next step. You then want to go on to sort of say, this is extremely effective because, or this is successful because. That's when you're into evaluation. You're talking about how successful something is. You're talking about how effective something is. You're talking about how significant something is or how important it is. And the best way to do that is to try and link all of these quotes together. So as I say, my first reason why I agree with this is that at the very beginning, what the writer does is the writer creates a sense of mystery. A mystery of why someone who is only a volunteer would stay up on the mountain. And whilst in following paragraphs, they partially answer that question, there seems to be a drive, a desire to achieve within Alice herself. But even whilst it's explaining why she might be continuing to dig whilst others have given up, in that same moment, it also plants the seed and the idea that whatever's about to happen is actually life-changing. Now that's really, really powerful and that's really effective because it plants the idea in our mind. Good answers to this question would then be able to spot, well, how does the writer develop this sense of it's going to be life-changing? And what you need to notice and look for is the fact that maybe the sense of mystery will grow deeper. Maybe the sense of life change will actually be repeated again. And it's one of my top tips for this question. Look for repeated patterns. And it's definitely in there. It talks about this being her last day down, and she doesn't want to admit. She doesn't want to go back to the main camp. And here's something else that's slightly mysterious, because it then introduces another sense of mystery. Let me read it to you, and let me see if you can spot what the mystery is. If she goes back down to the main camp now and admits she's onto something, everybody will want to be involved, and it will no longer be her discovery. Here's the mystery. What is it that actually means that she doesn't want to involve other people here? And it's answered there. It will no longer be her discovery. There's something inside of Alice that wants this moment for herself. And once again, the very fact that she wants this moment for herself, that's often a writer's way of signalling something really important and significant is about to change in the life of the character. So notice it, within one paragraph, we've got 2 hints that the life of this character is about to change. The most significant moment where we see this hint developed is in the next paragraph. This is line 34, and it says this: "In the days and weeks to come, Alice will look back to this moment." That is the clearest indication that something significant did happen in this moment. And in the writing, the way it's written in the future, and this is a flashback. So in that sentence, as it references the flashback, it references the fact that whatever is about to happen in this moment, I notice all the way through. Notice what the writer's doing. They are doing two things at once, which actually is really, really clever. And that's, once again, how you can evaluate. You can say, well, here's why this is really clever. Have you noticed what they're doing? I wonder if you did see it. On the one hand, by talking about the fact that Alice will look back on this moment in a flashback, what it does is it creates the expectation that something significant or life-changing is about to happen to Alice. But it also does something else. By continually referring to it, but saying words like something, it will, she will look back, you'll notice what it's not doing and what the writer's not doing. The writer isn't telling us at this moment what that significant thing is. If you look at it all the way, she uses words like something, this moment, if she goes back down. There's lots and lots of indications of if she'd done something different, something happened. If she goes back to this moment, all of these are vague terms that deliberately keep it mysterious what the actual thing that happened was. And you can therefore then begin to explain, well, why is that really effective? Why is that so powerful? And once you're doing this, you're then beginning to talk about the skill of evaluation. And notice how I'm linking things together. That's one of the most important things that I can really help you with when it comes to the skill of evaluating. Decide that you agree and then come up with all your different reasons and try and see how they link together. When you start a new analytical paragraph, use phrases like this. The writer develops this sense of mystery and introduces the idea of life-changing when they begin to talk about it is the use of the verb here, it's the use of the noun here, it's the use of the flashback here. And you notice how I'm doing that deliberately. I'm saying it's the use of noun, verb, adjective, repetition, imagery, description. Remember all the methods that you've learned, whether they're language or whether they're structure. This is the time to use them, but you're using them this time not to explain the effect of them, but to talk about how effective they are. How effective they are in creating mystery. How effective they are in creating this sense that Alice's life is about to change. So you'll notice all the way through. And then interestingly, what the writer then does is that the writer then describes in detail something completely different. Now, you may have missed this, but if you think about it properly, what's the writer doing? The writer's doing something that often writers do when they're trying to maintain the mystery of what they're about to reveal to you as the reader. They'll go off on a tangent and they'll describe something else. What this is doing is this is stalling the moment where it's revealed to you what it was that actually took place. And notice, it's even short sentences like this. If she had played by the rules. Indicating there that whatever it is that happened, it suggests that it's a negative event. It's good. It's not just going to change her life, but it's going to change her life profoundly in a negative way. There's a stubbornness on the inside of Alice, which means that she wants to be independent. She wants to do things on her own. And here, the writer is hinting, once again, foregrounding or foreshadowing the fact that it's partly her own independence that has actually led towards these life-changing events taking place. If you look then at the very end of the story, and this is where if you were being really sophisticated, you could talk about the fact that the way in which the writer ends this particular extract, it then comes back to talking about descriptive details once again. There's a focus, for example, on the temperature. There's a focus on the sky, and there's a focus on the sounds that Alice can hear. And once again, you'll notice what the writer is not revealing. The writer, having just hinted that something life-changing is about to take place, once again then refocuses the reader's attention onto something that appears to be really mundane and ordinary and simply just the physical aspects of where Alice happens to be. And deliberately, therefore, leaves the reader in suspense to find out what this mystery and what this life-changing event that has been so clearly hinted at, when it is going to take place. And that's how we deal with evaluation. Now, to do this in an exam situation obviously is really, really hard. And so I think one of the things that's really helpful is to generate lots of ideas. And then what you want to do is you want to try and order them or organize them. You'll notice as I've talked through it, I've come up with lots and lots of different ideas then. But just like I did with summarizing, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to work out, well, what's the most important ones? And then all you would do is you then put them down as your main reasons. So you're going to have one reason from early on in the extract. You're going to have maybe reason 2 and reason 3 from the middle of the extract, and reason 4 at the end. And in each one of those particular paragraphs, my suggestion to you would be this: have one key quotation that you're going to focus on, and then you can weave the other ones in as well. So what was it from early on that helped set the scene of mystery in this case? And then that's going to be the key quotation that you're going to explore. In the second one, maybe the writer has introduced, as is the case in this Alice extract, maybe they've introduced not just mystery, but also the first hint that something life-changing is about to happen. That's what I would do in paragraph 2. Then paragraph 3, I'm going to talk about the repetition of the idea that what's about to take place is very significant and is going to change Alice's life forever. And then weave that in with the way in which the writer deliberately interrupts these important suggestions and hints that something life-changing is about to happen with very ordinary details which at this point seem to allow the writer to actually keep us in suspense about what this mystery may be. And the fourth and final one will be looking at that final paragraph. How does it end? And in this case, I'm looking for, how is that actually supporting the sense of mystery? How is that supporting the sense of life change? Now, in this particular case, I don't think it necessarily actually supports the sense of life changing, but it does support the sense of mystery. And it supports the sense of mystery by not revealing something to us, by deliberately focusing our attention away from what the real and true life-changing event or moment is and what is about to happen. And that leaves us as a reader in a cliffhanger situation. So that's one way in which we can approach this idea of answering this evaluation question. Okay, so maybe you don't want to go down the line of number 1. You don't want an overview statement, and then you don't want lots of really long and complicated quotations. The other way to approach this is to approach it very much like an argument you're trying to win. So in other words, you just decide, right, I'm going to say that I agree with this statement, and you just list the 3 reasons that you have. And you decide with yourself that you're always just going to list 3 reasons. And you're going to choose those 3 reasons from the beginning, from the middle, and the end. And in each case, you're going to really, really focus on just using, rather than interweaving or anything like that, you're just going to focus on, my first reason for agreeing is, my second reason for agreeing is, my third reason for agreeing is. And what you're going to do, if you're going to do it with this approach, you're going to follow a very, very simple structure. Every single paragraph is going to be structured like this. It's going to start with, my first reason is, and then you're going to make a point. My first reason is that at the very beginning of the extract, Alice does. Then you're going to evidence it. So first sentence is make your point. Second sentence is, I'm going to include my evidence. Third sentence is then you're going to say, using this phrase, this is effective, or this creates a sense of mystery because. This creates a sense that it's life-changing because. And in that moment, you're going to do your evaluation of the effect statement. And then you're going to leave it there. You're going to make a point. You're going to use evidence, the quotation, and then you're going to evaluate the effect as briefly as you can. Now, This is a very, very simple way of answering this question, and many students quite like it because there's a lot of structure there. The downside of answering the question in this way is that most students generally cap themselves about 10 out of 20, because although it's simple and although it's really easy to follow, one of the things that it doesn't actually get you to do really is to think very hard for yourself. But if you're really struggling with this question and you really don't know what else to do, then it is a really, really great way of doing that. So that's evaluation. I know that this has been a really long session, and there's so much more that we could actually talk about with evaluation. I really encourage you, use the resource at the end. Begin to unpick this. Try and ask yourself your questions for yourself to help you really think through, why do you think what you think? When you have opinions, what are your reasons behind your opinions? Can you explain your opinions clearly and logically to someone else? Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I can't wait to see you again on English with Mr. Harding. And please remember, like, comment, subscribe. We do not want you to miss a thing.